Welcome to the Messy City Podcast, where we talk with the people who design, plan, build, develop, or even just think about how to create beautiful, successful, and humane cities and towns. Let's learn from each other and create places we truly care about. Welcome back to the Messy City Podcast. This is Kevin Klinkenberg. One of the really sexy, interesting stories of the last few months in the planning and development and even the housing world has been a project called California Forever. And it's this really fascinating, bold idea of building a brand new city in the Bay Area in California. And I've been following this for a little while, been super interested in the topic. And wanted to get somebody on to talk about it. So I'm really excited today to have Gabriel Metcalf join us, who is the head of planning for California Forever. Gabe, thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation. There's a lot about this project that's super fascinating. I think before we get into the details, I always do like to have people know a little bit about the person and your background. So how did you come to this position to be with such an interesting project? What's your background in the planning world?
Yeah, I am a city planner, and I worked most of my career in the policy space. I was 22 years at a group called SPUR, which is an urbanist think tank in the Bay Area. I ran that for many years and got a chance to work on housing and transportation, economic development, climate policy, all those things. So I had, I would say, a front row seat and was a protagonist in lots of the debates on those topics. I also had a really interesting opportunity to go to Sydney, Australia, and serve as the CEO of the Committee for Sydney, which is a think tank a bit like SPUR for Australia's largest city. And I was there 4 years. I came back at the start of 2023 to take on this role as the head of planning. And I guess just to maybe connect that backstory to why I am so excited to be doing this, I really came to the conclusion gradually that we needed another tool in terms of growth management. That, of course, careful incremental infill is, first priority. Suburban retrofits, great. Industrial brownfield redevelopment, great. We should be doing all of that. But that California's challenges with growth were just so much larger than the scale of what those solutions were turning out to be, which I really worked on my whole career. And so I started talking and writing about new towns as a strategy. So I was thrilled to be asked to actually work on one and try to put those ideas into practice.
That's very cool. So how did you find the team, or how did you find each other then? I guess now a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I got introduced to the person who is now my boss, who's the founder of the company, almost 10 years ago by a mutual friend who said, "You guys are both obsessed with new cities. You got to meet." So yeah, we hit it off. And then while I was in Australia, he did the land assembly, and so yeah, the timing just worked out.
So obviously the project has gotten a lot of attention, especially in the last year, but this has been quite a few years in the making. I wonder if you could trace just a little bit of how far back the idea goes and how did it get to this point today?
Yeah, well, the idea of new towns, first of all, I'm going to start there. The
Sure.
idea of new towns has a very long and important history in city planning. Ebenezer Howard's book, Garden
Hmm.
Cities of Tomorrow, is in some ways is the founding text of city planning in the English language, published in the 1890s, and it's a plan for building new towns in the greenbelt around London. And it's really just a simple diagram with a bunch of kind of Victorian concepts. There's the home for inebriates and the home for waifs, and
Hmm.
factories. But it's it's been a really big part of British town planning. The current UK Labour government has announced it's going to do 10 or 12 new towns. Um, it's also been important in American history, but in a bit of a different way. There is a kind of 1960s version of new towns, which is like Irvine, California, or Columbia, Maryland. Um, I think there's a maybe more current version, which is new urbanism,
Right.
and we very much see ourselves kind of standing on the shoulders of the new urbanists. We have the opportunity to take this on at a much bigger scale than the new urbanists have gotten the chance to do, but we're very influenced by them. This particular project, the founder started working on it. Um, must be 8 or 10 years ago now, um, and I think a very common story of people who come to Silicon Valley, to the wonderland of inventiveness, and then sort of say, wait, this is just crazy that with all of this creativity and energy and money, we are having such a hard time doing basic things like building houses for people. Um, and of course, the physical landscape of Silicon Valley is not innovative. It's suburban office parks, with a mixture of places that are something other than that. Um, and so I think he had the vision to say we've got to be able to create some kind of a better physical container for all of this amazing energy and drive. Um, and 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 so he had the idea of raising a fund and undertaking a really large, significant land assembly and taking a run at this.
And um, so I got like a whole bunch of questions, but so obviously that you've acquired a lot of land. How much land has the company acquired so far?
It's more than 60,000 acres.
Yeah. So I mean, it's an enormous piece of land in California, in the Bay Area, not cheap. So obviously, there's some other people who think it's a really important idea that are willing to invest and back it financially.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, some of the investors are big names in investing. Some are not. Yeah, I'm not investor facing, but I am grateful to them because I would not be getting to work on this if not for some people being willing to take a risk on this kind of a project.
Right. So one of the things I think that's interesting from my perspective in just kind of hearing about the idea is you talk about like the legacy of new towns and new town development. If you went back to like the 60s, the Columbia, Maryland, Reston, Virginia era outside of DC, those were conceived really as cities, as full cities with downtowns. As we got into the new urbanist world, which I'm most familiar with, when we started looking at Seaside and Kentlands and all the derivations of that across the country, I mean, a lot of those, to be frank, were just kind of bedroom communities. Some of them were Seaside's obviously a tourist community, without really a functioning like economy, a business economy other than that. Kentlands obviously is sort of a bedroom community for Washington, D.C. There are lots of examples like that. California Forever has this really bold idea of incorporating a lot of industry and the shipbuilding aspect into it. I wonder, as a planner, that must be really fascinating to dive into because that is really conceiving of a whole city in a way that some of these other experiments never really did.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in that. You know, I feel the need to first of all say that there's nothing wrong with bedroom communities,
Hmm.
and for the Bay Area in particular, we have really struggled to add housing, so we're behind on bedrooms.
Right.
So any developer that wants to come along and develop a walkable town that is just homes and shops, um, and thereby provide boost to housing supply for the Bay Area, I think should uh, get our blessing.
Hmm.
We're behind on bedrooms, but California Forever has the ambition to do more than that. We are really focused on jobs in advanced manufacturing, and I think the thing you got to realize about the just the terrible sclerosis in planning in California is that it's not only showing up in housing. That may be the most famous issue because California is has a well-earned reputation as being the capital of homelessness all over the rest of the world. So everybody's got this visual. They know we they know we don't know how to house our people. So people understand the housing shortage, but those same forces make it really difficult to build everything. They make it really hard to build factories, hard to build energy, hard to build transportation. And so in the end we need a YIMBY movement but for factories, a YIMBY movement but for transportation, a YIMBY movement but for energy. And I suppose that's what this term abundance is maybe coming to mean now. We are trying to create a space where it's possible to build all of those things. I think of this in a sense as a home for companies that are connected to the Bay Area innovation economy, but they need to build things in the real world. They're not just software companies. They need some space. And so we have a big industrial zone, 2,100 acres, which we're calling the Foundry, and it's a really interesting hybrid space. It's uh, it's part of the connected street grid. It's part of the city, but we're trying to be realistic about truck access and large building footprints, and try to create a very unique, distinctive place that is part of the modern industrial economy, including the possibility of really enormous floor plate buildings, if we're lucky enough to attract truly big factories. But also, it's a place you can get to by transit or by bike. It's a place that is within walking distance of dynamic mixed use neighborhoods. And so we're trying to see if we can bring all of that together in one place.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a unique aspect and something that I think a lot of places, not just California, have lost sight of. It's becoming increasingly hard. I mean, I'm in the Midwest. It's generally pretty easy to build a lot of things, but we have put our own constraints on some elements of what you talk about as well. And I've kind of talked about some of my friends who are in California that in a lot of ways, I think this is important because California is really just kind of a leading indicator of what happens often in the rest of the country. And in the planning and development world, it's become really easy to pick on California because it's so hard to build things, to build housing. I've worked on a number of projects in California. I can attest to it. But the reality is, it's like the same system that exists in California exists virtually across the country. It's just that California has had experienced several decades of incredible population growth and demand, a lot of pretty tough natural environments to build on, and really sort of a long period of time where a lot of these rules, that are what we're allowed to put in place really began to fester and grow in ways to as a reaction to all of that growth. And so a project like California Forever really is interesting because it's trying to take a step back. It seems to me to say, okay, let's get back to first principles and say we should be able to actually build really great places in our state to account for all of these uses. Does that seem like a fair statement?
Yeah, I think that's a really good summary. Um, and it's true that California's backlash against growth in the 1970s in the name of so-called environmentalism was quite extreme, and got more extreme over time, to the point where even things that most people in California would like to be able to say yes to have just gotten impossible to actually build. And I do worry about other parts of the country following in California's footsteps. I do worry about that. I mean, 20 years ago, I think planners in California, urbanists in California, would be very superior feeling to Texas. They would
Mm-hmm.
say, "Oh, Houston doesn't have zoning. They don't know what they're doing. That's just awful." But I think today people now realize, "Oh, wow, Texas is a competing model to California, and they're out competing us because they've made it much easier to build. We're not trying to copy Texas. We're trying to do something that is maybe a middle path where we're making it easy to build, but we are also trying to build in a way that is compact and focused on sustainability. And we really think it's important to show that we can do both things, achieve really sustainable outcomes, but yes, make it easy to grow, create a place to build."
Yeah. So before we get into some of the planning aspects, which obviously I'm really curious about, maybe you should back up and talk about what's the actual status of the project as we sit here in November 2025.
Yeah. So we have completed a draft of the city plan, um, and it got published 3 or 4 weeks ago on the Sassoon City website. Um, the Sassoon expansion plan is what it's called. I should say the Sassoon expansion specific plan is the formal name, and anybody can go download it. So that's a big milestone. It will surely be revised through the process, but a first draft is out there now, and you can see the transportation plan and the utility plans and the parks plans, and it's all there. We are now working on the environmental review. Will be tens of thousands of pages of documentation evaluating all of the environmental impacts, which is part of the process in California. The entitlement pathway that we are pursuing is having the city of Sassoon City annex the property in, and then approve a specific plan. That would then go to the county for a tax sharing agreement. Lots of other steps would have to happen. There will, of course, be environmental lawsuits. So there's a lot of process ahead, but we we at least are talking about an actual plan that people can read and discuss. So it feels like we've really made some progress.
What do you think is a realistic scenario for when you start breaking ground?
You know, if things go well, this could get approved next year in 2026, and um, it could be, depends on how long the environmental lawsuits take. So it's really hard to predict. But I mean, can imagine breaking ground 2027 or 2028.
Yeah. And as you envision it, obviously it's a big community. Maybe we should get some of the stats, like how big of a population do you anticipate? How big of sort of a collection of neighborhoods?
Yeah, the Population at full build out would be up to 400,000 people. That's going to take a really long time,
Right.
right? That's a 40 or 50-year build out. But yeah, it's it's a it's a much more substantial. Uh, I'm sorry. Let me answer that again. I'm looking up. I'm trying to get
Sure.
you the exact acres, and I want to say this the right way. And um, you know what? Can I just answer that question without giving you acres and just give you the
Yeah.
population?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Um, it's a simple question, but we've changed the way we're
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
tabulating it. So, okay, I'm going to start over. Um, yeah, for the stats, um, we're seeking an entitlement for up to 400,000 people. That would be built over 40 or 50 years, so a very long time. There'd be lots of phases, but that's the population at full build out.
Yeah. And that's pretty remarkable. That would be, how would that rank it in terms of the size of the cities in the state of California? That must be probably one of the, I don't know, 10 biggest or so in the state. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe not. Yeah.
I don't know. Good question.
Well, I'm
I don't
just,
have
it's
that list.
interesting.
I don't have that list in my head.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it speaks to kind of the audaciousness of the idea, which is really what's so interesting and appealing about it.
Yeah, and I do think it's part of why new towns need to be on our list of tools for growth management. It's a it's a tool that has the potential to hit a scale big enough to start to help solve the problem.
Yeah, yeah. So as you have worked on the planning piece of it, where just from a design and a planning standpoint, where have you drawn inspiration? Like what are some of the examples you've seen, other places that you've looked at and thought we really want to start to model this community after that?
Yeah, that's a nice question. The the underlying planning framework, I think, really owes most to the 19th century urban expansions in the United States. The the most important precedent there is the 1811 Commissioner's Plan for Manhattan,
Hmm.
where they extended the grid over the rest of the island from the earlier Dutch settlement in the south. Um, but the O'Farrell Plan for San Francisco in 1848 is that same vintage. In the 19th century, you had this incredible growth of the population of the United States, and that was done through a combination of urban extensions and new towns. Some of those new towns then eventually grew to be big towns, big cities. But there's a template that America used to know how to do. We laid down the street grid, divide the blocks into small parcels, sell them to developers, and the developers build their buildings. It is a process that it's so simple. It's so simple. We've forgotten how to do it. They didn't decide in advance where everything was going to go. Uh, they didn't control the architecture. There was no zoning. It was just selling small parcels to a bunch of different people to build buildings, and um, and then letting the city emerge over time. So that is really, I think, the framework that we're trying to adapt to modern times. We think it's a really good template. It's a really good way to do it. And of course, a new city in the beginning, it does not have the layering of history that you get from a place that has grown organically over hundreds of years. but we think that approaching it with the humility of not trying to control and micromanage every single building, but creating a place where other people can come and build is how, over time, we end up with a really interesting place. We have the possibility of evolution over time and of layering over time. Now, I will say that added to that, there are cities that have been really influential on me. There are cities where I've drawn a lot of inspiration. Um, Tokyo, I think, is important. It shows up. Sydney is really important. San Francisco and Los Angeles are important, of course, as the big cities in California. There's a lot from Chicago and New York. So um, I think the kind of special flavor will emerge from drawing inspiration, at least from a lot of those kinds of places.
What are some of the things that you see from a place like Tokyo or Sydney that inspire you? That what are some of the elements that you would hope to see in this place?
Yeah, Tokyo is a city that I think should be much more widely understood and emulated in this country. I mean, for one thing, it's continued to grow, it's continued to add population as the rest of Japan kind of empties out and people are moving to Tokyo. But it has remained incredibly affordable. And they essentially have, um, maybe more successfully than any city I can think of, managed to put those two things together: high rates of growth while remaining affordable. So it's just a place where they've made it possible to keep changing the city and keep adding supply. I mean, the other thing that's just extraordinary, it's the largest city in the world and it is so livable, it's so comfortable. So, how do they do that? Really interesting. I'm intrigued by also the fact that a lot of the buildings I think are quite ugly, quite plain, but what it adds up to is a very beautiful place, like really great, like bad architecture, good planning, perhaps,
Yeah.
and it Tokyo proves that it's the planning that matters more. There's also, I think, a specific way a lot of the neighborhoods are put together that is really um, important for us, which is these movement streets that have taller buildings on them, and then behind the movement street there's an interior neighborhood that is incredibly quiet with fine grained, um, tiny streets, and and so there's, we can call that a super block, perhaps, right? um,
Mhm.
Very different from the Barcelona super blocks,
Right.
different from the Radburn super blocks, but the Tokyo version of super block is, I think, quite appealing because you get these, you have a place for the bigger scale movement infrastructure and the bigger scale buildings, but then you also have this very intimate neighborhood character. And that's a sort of building block that is, it's a module that is repeated over and over in Tokyo.
So it kind of, all this leads me to think about some kind of wonky questions here. But, as somebody who worked, and I know you're familiar with the new urbanism really well and all that, one of the innovations was the form based zoning, which was sort of a different approach to zoning compared to what we've been doing since the 1920s. Uh, Form-based zoning also has its limitations and flaws. I wonder, as like a planner, how do you think about creating a development or a land use sort of process for a brand new community like this? Do you approach it from the standpoint of like you're going ahead and planning some of these first neighborhoods to be kind of as they are? Are you planning for evolution over time, demolition and evolution, much like because you bring up the Tokyo example, that's a terrific example of a place that's not static at all. But the American notion is often to be fairly static about how we think about cities.
Yeah. The idea of a form-based code, I think, is one of the most important innovations in modern planning. And so the idea there being, um, control how a building looks, but don't control what happens inside the building. We've proposed in our plan a bit of a hybrid. There is some use zoning, like there's an industry and technology zone that does not allow housing, and that is a place where um, streets are more optimized for trucks. It's a place where it's okay to be loud and unload materials all night long, if have have shifts in the factory 24 hours if that's what's wanted. And so it's not a place that is for living in the sense of a residential neighborhood, but with a few broad ideas like that, we've gone as far as we can to allow mixed use. And so we don't have any zoning called residential zoning. We have a broad category called neighborhood mixed use. And in neighborhood mixed use, yes, there's a lot of housing, but um, broad permission to open stores or offices throughout. One of the things that I found so charming and surprising about Tokyo is there'd be a nondescript building, and you go up to the sixth floor, and lo and behold, there's a gym, or there's a bar, or there's a restaurant. You have no idea what you're going to find, and every floor it might be a different thing. Um, just this incredible um, population density coupled with a cultural support for truly mixed uses. And so I'd love to be able to achieve even a small bit of that. I think that just adds so much more interest and vitality to a city. To your point about yeah, planning for redevelopment, absolutely. Um, we'll have a big say in what gets built the first time. We will have probably some kind of a pattern book um, serving as broad design guidelines. Another new urbanist idea.
Mhm.
Um, we're gonna, I think, invite other developers to bring their own interpretations and their own ideas. Um, I absolutely think we need to be planning for subsequent waves of development and redevelopment over the years. We need to welcome and embrace and expect change over time. And we're going to do everything we can to signal that in advance. That if you want to show up and be assured that nothing on your block will ever change again, this is not the place for you.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. I mean, uh, that would be such a different mindset for a lot of people. I mean, it's really truly an urban mindset. It's that if you go back enough historically, that's how we used to think about cities. But we've kind of become accustomed to this idea the last 5 or 6 decades that cities don't change much. Um,
Yeah, you're so right.
I'm also curious. So uh, I've seen a little bit of the drawings. Haven't gone through the whole package, but I've seen some of the renderings and everything. There also looks like a few innovations that you're looking towards as well that sort of take maybe some of the new urbanist ideas that have been popular over the last few decades and extending upon those and doing some different things. I wonder. It looked like maybe some much more broadly pedestrian oriented streets and things. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you see some of the innovations that you're working on from a design standpoint.
Yeah, yeah. Um, the in a way, I think the new urbanists just have not had the chance to work at a really big scale, and so maybe have not had to wrestle with the trade-offs about movement across a big space um, as much as we have to wrestle with those. If you go to Seaside, the way you get there is you drive and then
Mm-hmm.
you walk around once you're
Yeah.
there, and it's incredibly walkable once you're there. But then if you want to get to Alice Beach or Rosemary Beach down the road, you drive to them and then you walk around. And so it's a very successful series of new urbanist developments along the Florida panhandle there. But but the approach to movement is drive, and then walk. Across the scale we're working at, that wouldn't work. We have to find a way to accommodate a lot more people moving around, and we need to not repeat the mistakes of post-war American planning where the movement ends up destroying the place. And so we've gone really, really big on making every neighborhood walkable internally. Um, the concept being that every neighborhood is organized around a local shopping street where you get the groceries and the bars and the cafes and the gyms and the flower shops. Um, right, when if you're lucky enough to live in a historic neighborhood that has a thriving local shopping street, it's the center of neighborhood identity. It's where public life happens. It's really hard to achieve that in the modern world, but that's I think a kind of fundamental design goal for us. But moving between neighborhoods, we've got we've got to, we've got a few things that I think are important. We've got a really truly excellent biking network. It'll be the best in the country. It's a low bar there, but it's going to be really, really easy to bike around safely. And the idea being, little kids can bike, old people can bike. We also have a grid of rapid transit lines, and the way we've organized those, they're at grade, they're center running, but they are in physically separated rights of way, so not stuck behind traffic. Um, you can think of it that I think the planning term would be bus rapid transit,
Hmm.
but the right of way design, the section of the street, um, it's the same whether it's a bus or an autonomous van or even someday a tram with rail. It's the same street section. There's a space in the middle for the transit to run.
Hmm.
That's organized on a grid every half mile. I think one of the most intriguing parts of the plan that I'm most excited about is that each one of those rapid transit lines terminates at the edge of the city in a parking garage.
Hmm.
And so the idea is keep your car at the edge of the city, and then you proceed in by transit or foot or bike. And there
So,
will, of course, be some parking within the city too. There will, of course, be streets that accommodate cars, but far, far less space devoted to car movement or car storage than you would typically see in a city.
yeah. So obviously you're in the part of the world where autonomous vehicles, that's kind of like the headquarters of the world where people are working on all that and
Yeah.
experimenting. How does that technology or other technology kind of play into thinking about a new city?
Yeah, well, I'm a huge fan of autonomous vehicles. I ride Waymo all the time. Um, and for one thing, they're far safer than human drivers. And when you think about it, it's just insane that anybody let humans drive cars. Um, just the carnage and destruction that that is inflicted every day on people as a result of those things, which has only gotten worse from people texting while they drive. And so there's quite strong evidence that the autonomous vehicles are already much safer than human drivers. So I think that's going to be a really positive impact. There's a second order benefit that will emerge when all of the vehicles are autonomous, which is that they no longer will need to be designed to withstand a crash into another car.
Hmm.
And so all of a sudden you can imagine the bodies being made of styrofoam or the lightest weight material you can imagine. And so you get this compounding benefit for energy efficiency. With all that said, our our I think autonomous vehicles are still going to be fundamentally they're going to take up the same amount of space, and it's not a great urban technology. So we assume that um, all the vehicles will eventually be autonomous in this city as in every city, and that's positive. But we're not trying to make really wide roads to accommodate them. We still want to make it be a place where the focus is on walking and biking and transit, where I think we will get the most benefit, and real estate in the future will get the most benefit is in not having to provide as much parking for autonomous vehicles. The idea being that you just call one when you're ready. It takes you from point A to point B, and then it goes on and carries somebody else like a taxi.
Hmm.
And if that version of autonomy is what comes to pass, then all of a sudden our parking problem has gone away.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it sounds like also with your idea of the transit grid or those streets that can account for that, that's probably another network of autonomous vehicles. Either initially, maybe even initially with, like you said, maybe
Yeah,
they're
maybe
just
even
vans.
initially.
Yeah, yeah. So I probably should ask who are some of the people, who are some of the planners or designers that have helped you or worked with you on the concept?
Yeah, so the planning team at California Forever consists of, besides me, Bronson Johnson runs infrastructure, Jay Primus runs transportation, Anya Spivey is the head of real estate planning, and Jen Fox is the senior project manager. That team of people who are just incredible. I mean, some of the smartest planners and real estate people in the whole country. They then run a network of a bunch of consultants. Some of the key ones who have worked on this, um, Site Lab is the urban design firm, did most of the framework plan for the city. CMG is the landscape firm, great San Francisco based landscape firm. Fair and Piers is head on transportation planning. Then on the infrastructure and utility side, NGO is the geotech firm. EKI is doing water planning. CBG is the civil. We have many, many other consultants, but those are some of the most prominent ones.
What do you imagine existing cities, or what would you hope existing cities will be able to learn from this? And I ask that because that was definitely a lot of the big part of the new urbanist work was that the new towns that were built also really helped inform ideas that could help older cities. It really helped spur the movement for accessory dwelling units and different approaches to codes and just pedestrian design. But I'm curious what you think, as somebody with the long experience that you have in the Bay Area, how this project might help older cities as they move ahead.
Yeah, it's a great question. For cities that are fundamentally intact, they didn't tear down the the old urban fabric. They didn't destroy their centers with urban freeways. Um, I don't think I don't think they are going to learn. They're not going to learn a new approach from us, except maybe the idea that they should loosen up on accommodating incremental change. That they should make it a lot easier to add buildings within their framework because their framework is so strong. It holds up. I think one of the biggest lessons from the failures of modernism is that we should be very skeptical of um, neighborhood scale urban change inside an existing city, referring, of course, to urban renewal.
Mm-hmm.
Slum clearance, where they tear down whole blocks and whole neighborhoods to try to replan a modern city. We should really be very skeptical of that, of change at that scale inside a city. But I think we learned the wrong lesson. In the backlash against modernist planning, we've ended up making it um, so difficult to accommodate any change at all inside cities. And so I think the most important thing that those intact older cities need to learn is they just need to make it easier to add buildings. It's okay to have a tall building next to a short building. You don't need to worry about it about matchy neighborhood character. As long as the footprint of the building is not too big, you can have scale changes and it's just fine. I think where we maybe have a lot more uh, that we're figuring out that could be helpful is for people who are trying to retrofit suburbia. Um, Retrofitting suburbia is so popular among planners. Every every planning school in the country runs urban design studios where they give them suburban retrofit projects. They've been drawn lovingly thousands of times, but hardly ever happened in the real world, with one exception. And I would say that exception is redevelopment of dead shopping malls.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and that's the exception that proves the rule, because shopping malls come pre-assembled.
Yeah.
When you're trying to do real suburban retrofits outside of that context, the streets were put in the wrong way, and the property ownership is already really fragmented. And essentially, when you do incremental densification in a suburban retrofit context, it it can end up being quite useless density. If you add an apartment building in the middle of sprawl, everybody who lives in that apartment building still doesn't have anything they can walk to.
Hmm.
They all still need a car for every trip, and so it's not very useful density. So I think it's time for some more sophisticated um, planning approaches on how to introduce not just density, but nodes of walkability organized around town centers into suburban retrofits. And I think what we're trying to figure out in terms of those neighborhood town centers could be a helpful model if it works. That's getting ahead of things. We got to build this thing first and make sure it's working.
Yeah. The last thing I want to ask is maybe a bit of an off the wall question, but just kind of thinking about, you know, I've worked a lot as a planner and designer and designed new communities and retrofitted others. And, you always think you're doing a great job. But there's always like a couple of things that linger in your head you worry a little bit about. Like, oh, did we get this right? Did we get that right? Are there, as you look ahead to where this might go eventually and how it might build out, are there any, what are the aspects that might concern you, or you've just really given a lot of thought to because you're not uh, entirely sure how it's going to go?
Yeah, that's such a great question. We still get to revise the plan, so for the most part, anything I can think of, I still get to fix it. Um, but I'll say this: we're going really big on the public realm, the streets, parks, plazas. We're trying to organize neighborhoods around these local shopping streets. All of that assumes that people are going to be continuing to want to be in public with each other.
Hmm.
And I think the thing that worries me most is when I see trends toward people um, kind of living through their mobile phones, not going out as much,
Yeah.
not dating, not being out in public, just ordering deliveries to their houses and living intermediated through a virtual screen. We're building a city based on public life. And so we need people to embrace public life and put their phone down and come out and stroll up and down the promenade.
Yeah. Yeah. That's well said. I think that's a legit concern. Can we adapt and overcome our own technology in some respects that is so captivating?
Yeah.
So the results are pretty mixed right now, even in really nice cities. Uh, really nice
Yeah.
cities and towns, a lot of people just kind of retreat to their hermetically sealed um, box, I guess you could say. Um, well, I really appreciate the time and talking about this today. Uh, Wish you guys nothing but the best of luck as you move ahead. Uh, if anybody wants to follow the path or the progress of California Forever, what do you suggest is the best way to do so?
Well, of course, come to californiaforever.com and use that as your portal to learn more. And thank you, Kevin, very much for having me on the show.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure, Gabriel. I really appreciate it. All right. Take care, everybody. Thanks so much.
Bye bye.